Brilliance Audio presents The Whitby Murders by J.R. Ellis, performed by Michael Page.
"Lock the door behind us so that Dracula can't follow," giggled Maggie. "I feel like a kid again doing this."
The others laughed as Ben locked the door. Dominic and Andrea were still arguing fiercely as they entered a room set out like a ruined chapel and graveyard. There was a broken altar and 2 gravestones lying on the floor. Bats hung from the ceiling. On the altar lay an open book.
"Right, where do we start in here?"
asked Maggie.
"Let's start with that book. I'm sure that will contain a clue. Maybe—"
She was interrupted by Andrea shouting.
"How dare you say that?" she screamed. "Who's going to stop me, you cow?"
spat Dominic. They were now having a furious row, and Andrea struck him across the face.
"Dom, Andrea, for God's sake, that's enough!"
shouted Ben, but Dominic wasn't listening. His face was contorted. He looked out of control with anger and hatred. To everyone's horror, he produced a knife and lunged at Andrea, who screamed again, with terror this time. She fell onto the gravestone.
"No! Oh, my God!"
cried Dominic. He looked around wildly at the others, his hand on his forehead as he gasped for breath. He ran out of the emergency exit, slamming the door behind him. It was over in seconds. The others, momentarily stunned, now screamed and shouted,
"Dom! What the hell? He had a bloody knife! He's gone mad!"
Ben was next to Andrea when she fell. He knelt down to attend to her. There was already fake blood on her white dress, but now there was more blood, and it was coming out of her mouth.
"He's stabbed her! He's bloody stabbed her in the chest!" shouted Ben.
Horror-struck, Maggie and Louise looked at Andrea. Her eyes were closed, and she was groaning. Her hand was clutched to her chest where the handle of a knife was visible.
"Oh, my God, Andrea!" cried Maggie.
"Quick!" said Ben. "Get back to reception. Tell them to call an ambulance. She's still alive, but quick!"
"I'll go,"
said Louise, who still had the key. She opened the door back into the first room and dashed through. She met the actor dressed as Dracula, who was waiting in there for the next 20 minutes to be up. "What's going on?" he asked in a Yorkshire accent. Louise realized that the play acting had stopped and the horror was now real. She explained what had happened, and they hurried back to reception. "I'll get the first aid kit," said the actor. Elaine was coming out of the toilet door as they arrived. She'd been away from the desk when the attack happened and had not seen it on the monitor. She immediately rang for an ambulance.
"Stay with us! Stay with us!"
Back in the second room, Ben pleaded with the unconscious form of Andrea as he cradled her head.
"Do you have anything to staunch the blood?"
he said to Maggie. She ripped off a piece of her petticoat and gave it to Ben. At that moment they heard something through the emergency door. Ben looked up.
"Is that him? Go and see, will you? I'll stay with her. I've done first aid. I'm checking on her breathing."
Maggie tried to open the emergency exit. It seemed to be blocked by something, and she had to push for some time before she got through. There was a heavy packing case behind the door. Dominic must have dragged it there to slow their pursuit. She found herself in another room, which was obviously used as storage. It was full of boxes and props and a big wardrobe. There was a coffin and a rail of costume items. Fixed into the wall vertically was a mummy's sarcophagus. It was dark, but across the room she could see another door marked Exit, which presumably led onto the street. The door was open, but there was no sign of Dominic. She went through the door and out onto a narrow, dirty alleyway full of wheelie bins and rubbish. She looked up and down, but it was deserted, so she ran back to help Ben with Andrea. She found him still holding her, but crying with his head bowed over. Her body was limp and her eyes closed. There was more blood on her chest. Louise, Elaine, and the Dracula actor came into the room, the latter holding the bright red first aid case.
"We've called the ambulance," began Louise. "They said—"
"It's too late," sobbed Ben. "I think she's gone. There's no pulse."
He looked up with a face of anguish and incomprehension.
"Did that just happen?" He's killed her! What the hell is going on?"